Allow me to educate you on a particular point, Madam Secretary, Dan Bongino stated, shifting forward in his chair as his distinct Queen's inflection became noticeably sharper, resembling a sword being unsheathed. I spent 12 years protecting people exactly like you within the Secret Service's presidential details. Do you understand the realization I came to during that decade plus? Those who demand the highest level of protection are frequently the ones who deserve it the absolute least. Hillary Clinton's practiced smile wavered for only an instant, but Bongino noticed it immediately. He had spent years analyzing facial behaviors, scanning for telltale indicators, and recognizing the microscopic expressions that separate veracity from deception. That transient twitch communicated everything necessary for him to grasp the dynamic. She was already rattled, and he hadn't even commenced his main line of inquiry yet. The CNN town hall gathering had actually been her idea initially. The chosen topic was accountability within police work, and Hillary had presented herself as the authoritative specialist on Department of Justice supervision. She was portraying herself as the rational voice pushing for essential improvements. She had spent the preceding hour lecturing the agreeable crowd concerning the perils of weaponizing law enforcement agencies, discussing the requirement for impartial institutions and safeguarding democracy against autocratic personalities. Afterward, Anderson Cooper introduced FBI Deputy Director Dan Bongino, at which point Hillary's whole bearing altered instantly. The patronizing smirk emerged, the specific look she saved solely for those she considered below her rank. She perceived him merely as an ex-podcaster, a right-wing media figure and a beat cop from Queens masquerading in a role he had no right holding. She interrupted before Cooper could even finish his opening query directed at Bongino, stating, "Anderson, I feel we must acknowledge the glaring issue here," accompanied by that distinctive laugh that caused half the country to flinch. Mr. Bongino, pardon me, Deputy Director Bongino, spent years on his audio program advancing dangerous conspiracy theories concerning the FBI, regarding me, and about our intelligence community. The crowd clapped with great enthusiasm. They were her loyalists, hand-picked Democrats present to offer support. They were there to supply the adulation she sought and to help reconstruct her public persona for whatever political comeback she was currently engineering. "He is presently unfit for the office he occupies," Hillary proceeded, her tone saturated with that specific Ivy League superiority she had refined over many decades. "He is a political operative who poses a danger within law enforcement. He protected presidents supposedly, but evidently grasped nothing about how the government actually operates." Further applause erupted, causing Anderson Cooper to shift uneasily in his moderator's spot, visibly unsure if he ought to intercede. The event was clearly deviating from the established itinerary. Bongino simply sat there observing, making notations on a yellow pad. His jaw was clenched, a tell recognized by those familiar with him, yet his countenance remained composed and executive. He had confronted significantly worse antagonists than Hillary Clinton. He had faced down would-be assassins, terrorists, and narcotics traffickers intent on murdering the leader of the free world. A washed-up politician attempting to salvage her legacy did not intimidate him in the slightest. When Hillary finally finished her opening salvo, obviously satisfied that she had relegated this upstart to his proper position, Bongino placed his pen down with deliberate calm. It was the manner in which one sets something down when patience has expired. "Have you concluded, Madam Secretary?" His tone was soft, almost dangerously so, because I have been anticipating this exact dialogue for a very long time. Hillary's smirk grew broader. She was convinced she had already secured victory. She believed she had cowed him into submission using her credentials, her arrogance, and her meticulously crafted public image as the nation's most experienced public servant. She had absolutely zero conception of what was about to occur. Bongino reached down beside his seat and lifted a thick three-ring binder. It was the specific type federal investigators utilize for case files, the kind holding evidence organized specifically for eventual prosecution. "Let me articulate something regarding conspiracy theories," he commenced, his Brooklyn accent beginning to permeate the professional facade. A conspiracy theory involves making wild accusations without possessing a shred of validating evidence. What I am preparing to do is submit facts, original documents, your actual words, and your own electronic mail evidence. He opened the binder. Hillary's expression froze solidly on her countenance. See the reality about serving as the deputy FBI director, Bongino looked straight at her, his eyes hard as flint, is that I possess access to records, significant quantities of records, and unlike certain individuals, I actually examine them. The assembly had gone entirely silent. Even Cooper was leaning forward now, sensing that the meticulously choreographed town hall was on the verge of total collapse. You referenced my prior service in the Secret Service, Bongino persisted. You are accurate. I did protect presidents, and I maintained a top-secret SCI clearance. Do you comprehend what that classification signifies, Madam Secretary? That is sensitive compartmented information, the absolute highest classification level that exists. He paused momentarily, allowing the magnitude of that declaration to resonate. Do you know what the outcome would have been for me if I had transmitted classified data via my personal email account? If I had housed top-secret documents on a private server situated in my master bathroom? He did not pause for her to respond. I would be residing in federal prison. Not maybe, not probably, but unquestionably. I would forfeit my security clearance, my career, my retirement, and my liberty. And you know what? That is precisely what ought to happen to anyone who mishandles sensitive classified information. Bongino flipped the binder open to a specific tabbed section. However, let us discuss your electronic correspondence since you saw fit to challenge my qualifications. Hillary's face had drained of color, and she attempted to speak, but Bongino forged ahead. He had spent too many years listening to her deceptions to allow her to twist this situation now. FBI case file summary, Clinton email investigation, he declared, holding up a record for the cameras to observe. 33,843 emails sent or received through your private server while you were occupying the office of Secretary of State. Hundreds of them contained classified intelligence. He extracted another page, reading directly from the written text. This email right here, transmitted June 14, 2011, is labeled Top Secret Special Access Program. That is SAP, Madam Secretary. You know precisely what that indicates. That is intelligence so highly sensitive that even individuals with top-secret clearance cannot view it unless they possess specific authorization. His volume was increasing now, the managed outrage starting to seep through his executive demeanor. This email concerned drone strike operations, identities of intelligence assets, and operational specifics. And where was this extremely sensitive intelligence stored? On your private server in your residential basement in Chappaqua, New York. He slammed the page down aggressively on the table positioned between them. This one is marked secret, no foreign. That signifies absolutely no foreign nationals are permitted to view it. It contains comprehensive conversations with foreign heads of state and intelligence assessments regarding their governments. All residing on your bathroom server. Hillary attempted to intercede, stating, that entire matter has been exhaustively litigated. The FBI conducted an investigation and determined that you were extremely careless. Bongino cut her off, his Brooklyn accent now undeniable. That is a direct verbatim quote from former Director Comey. Would you prefer I read the entire public statement to you because I have it right here? He flipped to a different tab within his binder. Although we did not discover clear evidence that Secretary Clinton or her associates intended to violate statutes governing the handling of classified intelligence, there is evidence that they were extremely careless in their handling of very sensitive, highly classified information. Bongino looked up at her piercingly. Extremely careless with top-secret intelligence. Intelligence that could potentially result in people being killed. And do you know what the consequence was for you? He held up his hands in feigned bewilderment. Nothing. Not a solitary damn thing. No prosecution, no charges initiated, not even a minor administrative black mark. The audience was now completely mute. Even Hillary's defenders were at a loss for words. These were not conspiracy theories. This was the ex-FBI director's own declaration being read aloud by the sitting deputy FBI director. But Bongino was not finished, not remotely finished. "Let us discuss what transpired after you were discovered," he said, his voice dropping back to that menacingly quiet tone. "After you were subpoenaed. After you received a lawful order to preserve all relevant evidence." He extracted a technical analysis report from the file. 33,000 emails vanished, just poof, gone. You asserted they were purely personal in nature, wedding details, yoga schedules, innocent content. Bongino's chuckle was abrasive, nothing like Hillary's practiced cackle. However, they were not just deleted, were they? They were destroyed, professionally obliterated using software known as BleachBit. He elucidated for the audience's understanding, his tone adopting that lecturing style he had perfected on his podcast. BleachBit is not analogous to emptying your digital recycling bin. It is not like merely hitting the delete key. It is professional-grade evidence destruction software. It overwrites the data multiple times so that nobody, not the FBI, not the NSA, not anyone, can ever retrieve it. It is the specific kind of tool that narcotics traffickers utilize, mob bosses, people who genuinely possess something to conceal. He leaned back in his seat, spreading his hands widely. 33,000 emails regarding yoga? Lady, I did not believe you have performed 33,000 yoga poses in your entire lifetime. A few individuals in the assembly actually laughed. They could not suppress it. Even Hillary's backers could perceive the inherent absurdity of the assertion. Hillary's countenance was flushed crimson now. Those were personal emails. I had every legal right to. "After you received a subpoena?" Bongino retorted instantly. "That is not a legal right. That constitutes destruction of evidence. That is obstruction of justice." He extracted yet another document from his voluminous file. "Do you know who actually goes to incarceration for mishandling classified intelligence? Let me inform you. Let me tell you about the citizens who play by the regulations you believe do not apply to you." His voice was ascending again, passion eclipsing standard procedure. "Christian Saucier, a Navy sailor, took photographs inside a submarine. 6 pictures resulted in a year in federal prison. Reality winner and NSA contractor leaked 1 classified document to the media. She received 63 months in federal incarceration. Brian Nishimura, a naval reservist, downloaded classified materials to personal devices. He received 2 years of probation, a $50,000 fine, and forfeiture of his security clearance." Bongino's finger was jabbing forcefully at the table now with every name he articulated. "These are genuine people, real lives that were destroyed for performing a fraction of what you did. And do you know what the distinction between you and them is?" He stared directly at Hillary. "They were not wealthy, they were not connected, and they were not Clintons. They were just ordinary Americans who made errors and paid the price for them. Meanwhile, you established an entire private server system, conducted all your State Department business on it, transmitted and received classified intelligence for 4 years, and then destroyed evidence while under subpoena." The pause that ensued was devastating in its quietude. "And you are sitting here lecturing me concerning accountability?" Anderson Cooper finally located his voice amidst the palpable tension. "Secretary Clinton, would you care to respond to these assertions?" Hillary's hands were trembling slightly. Bongino noted that he had rattled her, and they both comprehended it. This is precisely the kind of partisan witch hunt that— "Partisan?" Bongino's voice cracked sharply like a whip, interrupting her. "I am reading from the FBI director's own statement, your own electronic correspondence, and federal court documents. These are verifiable facts, Madam Secretary, not partisan assaults." He flipped to a fresh section of his binder, and Hillary visibly flinched at the movement. "However, you are accurate about one thing," Bongino stated, his tone shifting slightly. "The emails were merely the symptom. Let us discuss the actual disease. Let us talk about the Clinton Foundation." This was the juncture where the situation was going to become truly unpleasant, and everyone in the studio could sense the shift in atmosphere. Bongino extracted financial records, spreading them across the table for viewers to observe. You served as Secretary of State from 2009 to 2013, a duration of 4 years. During that interval, the Clinton Foundation accepted over $2 billion in donations. He allowed that staggering figure to hang in the air for a moment. $2 billion for a charity that, according to charity watchdog organizations, expenditures less than 10% of its revenue on actual charitable work. Hillary attempted to interrupt him, but Bongino just forged ahead. He was in full prosecutorial mode now. Let us examine who was donating, shall we? And let us look at what transpired immediately following their donations. He extracted a timeline chart to illustrate his point. Uranium One, a Russian nuclear agency, desires to acquire a company controlling 20% of America's uranium production. This transaction necessitates approval from 9 government agencies, including the State Department. Your State Department. Bongino's finger traced the timeline he had arranged. Russian interests donate $145 million to the Clinton Foundation. Your spouse bill gets paid $500,000 for a single speech delivered in Moscow. And then, surprise, surprise, the State Department approves the deal. He looked up at her with a pointed expression. Now, I am just a guy from Queens who grew up above a candy store, but where I originate, we refer to a transaction like that as a bribe. The audience gasped audibly at the direct accusation. Hillary's face had gone from crimson to almost purple with fury. "How dare you?" she sputtered indignantly. "I was not personally involved in that specific decision. The State Department possesses career officials who manage these reviews." "You expect us to accept that?" Bongino interrupted again, his voice now saturated with sarcasm. "That the Secretary of State possessed absolutely zero influence over her own department's major policy decision? That you had absolutely no idea this highly significant deal was occurring under your watch?" He extracted an organizational chart of the department. "Here is the State Department structure, here is your office, and here is your operational authority. Either you are prevaricating regarding your lack of involvement, or you are admitting you were such an incompetent Secretary of State that you did not know what your own department was doing with one of the most significant nuclear deals in years." He leaned forward intently. "So, which is it, Madam Secretary? Corrupt or incompetent? Because it must be one or the other." Hillary's mouth opened and closed, but no words emerged. For a woman who had spent her entire career crafting careful responses to difficult questions, she suddenly had nothing to say. Bongino pressed his advantage immediately. "Let us discuss Haiti," he stated, and his voice adopted an edge of genuine, simmering anger. "The 2010 earthquake was a horrific tragedy with hundreds of thousands deceased, billions in relief funds poured in from around the globe to help." He extracted more documents concerning the relief efforts. The Clinton Foundation positioned itself as a major coordinator of these relief efforts. Your brother, Tony Rodham, somehow secured a lucrative gold mining contract in Haiti during this period. Foundation projects received priority treatment, and foundation donors obtained special access. His voice was ascending again with indignation. Meanwhile, Haitians are still residing in tents more than a decade later. The money vanished into projects that never materialized, but your foundation certainly did well out of the situation. He read from testimony provided by Haitian activists. The Clinton Foundation utilized our tragedy to raise funds and enrich themselves. They promised to build back better, but they built nothing except their own wealth. Bongino looked at Hillary with undisguised contempt. You utilized a natural disaster, the suffering of the poorest people in the Western Hemisphere, to enrich your family and your foundation. That is not public service, Madam Secretary. That is exploitation. Those are discredited allegations from— Hillary started to argue. Discredited by whom? Bongino fired back instantly. By you, by your associates, and by the media outlets you donate to. He extracted a list of foreign donations to the foundation. Saudi Arabia, $10 to $25 million donated to your foundation. Qatar, 1 to 5 million. Kuwait, Oman, UAE, millions donated from each. His finger stabbed at each entry on the list. These nations do not exactly possess stellar records on women's rights, or human rights, or any rights, really. Saudi Arabia literally beheads individuals in public squares, but they donated millions to your foundation while you were Secretary of State. Bongino extracted meeting schedules and arms deal approvals to demonstrate the correlation. Look at what transpired. A donation from Saudi Arabia received in March 2011, followed by a meeting with you in April. A massive arms deal was approved in May, $29 billion in weapon sales. He displayed document after document establishing the pattern. Qatar donates, secures a meeting, and gets special consideration for hosting the World Cup despite credible allegations of slave labor. Kuwait donates and subsequently gets weapons deals approved. The pattern is as clear as day. Donate to the Clinton Foundation, gain access to Secretary Clinton, and get what you desire from the United States government. Bongino's voice was filled with disgust. That is not charity work. That is money laundering through a foundation structure. That is pay-to-play politics. That is corruption, pure and simple. Hillary was gripping the arms of her chair so tightly that her knuckles were turning white. And here is the most telling element, Bongino stated, extracting a graph. Here is a record of Clinton Foundation donations over time. See this spike right here? That is when you became Secretary of State, donations exploded. Foreign governments were falling over themselves to give you money. He traced the line across the graph to a later date. And here, right here, is when you lost the 2016 election and possessed no more power to sell. The graph demonstrated donations plummeting rapidly after that date. If this was truly about charity, about assisting people, why did the funds dry up the second you lost political power? Why did all those foreign governments suddenly cease caring about your alleged good work? He did not wait for an answer from her. Because they were not donating out of the generosity of their hearts. They were purchasing access, purchasing influence, and purchasing favors from the United States government. And when you had nothing left to sell them, they stopped buying. Bongino sat back slightly, but he was not finished, not remotely finished. You want to discuss my time in the Secret Service? His voice dropped, becoming more personal and emotional. Let me inform you what we learned in that job. Lesson number 1, you protect the principal. Lesson number 2, you never abandon people in the field. Never. He extracted photographs of 4 faces. Ambassador Chris Stevens, Sean Smith, Tyrone Woods, Glenn Doherty. He enunciated each name slowly, carefully, and with deep respect. Benghazi, September 11th, 2012. 4 Americans deceased after 13 hours of calling for help that never arrived. Bongino's voice was shaking now, not with anger, but with something profounder. It was the fury of a man who had spent his career protecting people, now observing someone who had failed that most basic duty. Ambassador Stevens dispatched cables, emails, and requests for additional security. He informed you Libya was hazardous. He told you the security situation was deteriorating. He told you explicitly that he required more protection. He extracted the actual cables and held them up for the camera. Requested in March, denied. Requested in April, denied. Requested in June, denied. Requested in August, denied. Each word he spoke was akin to a hammer blow. And you know what your State Department stated in response? Resources unavailable. No funds for security. No personnel available. We cannot assist you. Bongino's voice was growing louder with each sentence. However, you located resources to support regime change in Libya. You found resources to arm rebels. And you found resources for everything except protecting our own people on the ground. He extracted the detailed timeline of the assault. September 11th, the attack commences at 9:40 p.m. local time. Ambassador Stevens and Sean Smith take refuge in the safe room. The compound is overrun and they perish from smoke inhalation. His voice cracked slightly as he continued the narrative. Tyrone Woods and Glenn Doherty were at a CIA annex nearby. They heard the assault and desired to respond immediately. They were instructed to stand down to wait for local security to handle it. Bongino had to pause briefly to manage his rising emotions. They disobeyed those orders and went anyway because that is what operators do. They do not abandon people. They went to assist. They fought for hours and eventually died on a rooftop waiting for backup that never arrived. The emotion in his voice was raw now, very real. This was not political theater. This was genuine rage from a man who comprehended what it meant to put one's life on the line. 13 hours, he stated quietly. They fought for 13 hours, called for aid, begged for air support, for quick reaction forces, for anything. He looked directly at Hillary with intensity. And help never arrived because you could not be bothered. Because it was politically inconvenient for you at the time. Because you were too occupied planning your presidential run to save American lives. Hillary's face was ashen now. This was impacting her in a manner the emails and the foundation scandals hadn't. And then, and this is what really demonstrates who you are, you lied to their families. Bongino extracted testimony from the families of the fallen Americans. Charles Woods, father of Tyrone Woods, states you stood next to his son's casket and informed him it was because of a YouTube video, a spontaneous protest gone wrong. Patricia Smith, mother of Sean Smith, says you looked her in the eye and promised to get the guy who made that video. Kate Quigley, sister of Glenn Doherty, says you told her the exact same thing. Bongino's voice was shaking with barely managed fury. But you knew it was not a YouTube video causing the violence. You knew it was a planned terrorist assault because you sent an email that very night confirming it. He held up a printed email document. Email to your daughter, Chelsea, 10:11 p.m., 2 hours after the attack commenced. Quote, 2 of our officers were killed in Benghazi by an al-Qaeda-like group. Bongino read it slowly, ensuring every word landed with impact. An al-Qaeda-like group? That is what you told your daughter? That is what you told the Egyptian Prime Minister the next day. That is what you told everyone who actually mattered. His voice rose to a shout now. But you stood next to those caskets. You looked those mothers and fathers in the eye and you lied to them about how their sons died. The studio was entirely silent except for his reverberating voice. You told them it was a video, a protest, spontaneous violence when you knew it was terrorism. You knew it was a planned attack. You knew the truth. Bongino's hands were shaking as he extracted the video clip reference. And then, when you finally had to testify before Congress, when you had to answer questions about why you lied, you know what you said? He didn't require the document for this quote. He had it memorized. What difference at this point does it make? The silence following those words was crushing in the studio. Bongino allowed it to stretch out, letting everyone absorb what she had stated and what she had intended by it. Then, very quietly, he spoke again. What difference does it make? I will tell you what difference it makes, Madam Secretary. His voice was deadly calm now, more frightening than when he had been shouting. It makes a difference to Patricia Smith, who still does not possess answers about why her son died. It makes a difference to Charles Woods, who knows you looked him in the eye and lied. It makes a difference to Kate Quigley, who lost her brother while you worried about your political future. He stood up now, unable to sit still any longer due to the intensity of the moment. It makes a difference to the next ambassador who gets dispatched to a hazardous posting and wonders if his Secretary of State will protect him or abandon him. It makes a difference to every Foreign Service officer who puts their life on the line and needs to know their government has their back. Bongino's voice rose significantly again. It makes a difference to the American people, who deserve leaders who tell the truth, who take responsibility, and who value American lives more than political convenience. He was nearly shouting now at the former Secretary of State. That is what difference it makes. Anderson Cooper was attempting desperately to regain control of the situation. We need to take a commercial break right now, Cooper stated, but Bongino was not finished with his examination. You labeled me a conspiracy theorist, he stated, ignoring Cooper entirely. Let us discuss the grandest conspiracy theory in modern American history, the one you financed. He flipped to a fresh section in his binder, and Hillary's eyes went wide with realization. The Steele dossier, the Russia hoax, the greatest fraud ever perpetrated on the American people. Bongino extracted payment records to substantiate his claim. Your campaign financed the law firm Perkins Coie. Perkins Coie financed Fusion GPS. Fusion GPS retained Christopher Steele, a foreign operative, to dig up dirt on your political opponent. He arranged the paper trail clearly for everyone to see. Steele went to Russian sources, actual Russian intelligence operatives, and compiled a dossier full of salacious, unverified, and ultimately false allegations against Donald Trump. Bongino's voice was scathing in its delivery. You paid for Russian disinformation to be created. You paid for a foreign operative to collaborate with Russian intelligence to create fake evidence against your political opponent. And then, you fed it to the FBI, you fed it to the media, and you utilized it to trigger a special counsel investigation. He extracted internal FBI documents to prove his point. And you want to know the kicker here? The FBI knew it was garbage from the very beginning. Internal FBI documents demonstrate agents labeled it uncorroborated, unreliable, and impossible to verify. Bongino read directly from the records. Unable to corroborate any of the substantive allegations. That is what the FBI stated internally. But they utilized it anyway to obtain FISA warrants to spy on American citizens and to launch investigations. His finger jabbed accusingly at Hillary, and it all traced back to you. Your campaign, your money, your dirty tricks. Hillary was attempting to speak, attempting to defend herself against the onslaught, but Bongino was rolling now. You could not accept that you lost the election. You could not believe that the American people rejected you. So you manufactured this narrative that Trump was a Russian asset, that he had stolen the election, and that he was compromised. Bongino's voice was filled with contempt for her actions. You got your associates in the FBI to investigate it, your associates in the media to amplify it 24/7, and your associates in Congress to impeach him. 4 years. For 4 years of investigations, he endured this. He spread his hands wide in a gesture of finality. You know what they discovered after all that? Nothing. No collusion, no conspiracy, no genuine evidence. It was all a hoax. A hoax you created, a hoax you financed, and a hoax you utilized to undermine a democratically elected president. Hillary finally located her voice amidst the accusations. This is absurd, she stated. The Mueller investigation discovered no collusion, Bongino shouted over her. After 2 years, $40 million, 19 lawyers, and 40 FBI agents, they found nothing. He was standing now, leaning threateningly toward her. But the damage was done, wasn't it? You poisoned half the country against their own president. You damaged our democracy and caused Americans to distrust their own institutions, all because you could not handle the fact that you lost. Anderson Cooper was practically begging now. We really need to go to commercial break. Hillary stood up abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. I don't have to sit here and be subjected to this, she declared. This is character assassination. Character assassination? Bongino's chuckle was abrasive and dismissive. I am reading from FBI files, federal documents, your emails, and your foundation's tax returns. These are facts, Madam Secretary. Hillary started removing her microphone hurriedly, her hands shaking noticeably. You labeled Trump supporters deplorables, Bongino stated, his voice suddenly quieter but no less intense. Half the country. You just wrote them off as beneath you. Racist, sexist, homophobic, xenophobic. What was the word you utilized? Irredeemable. He shook his head slowly in disgust. You know what I see when I look at those people you despise? I see my family. My neighbors from Queens. Cops, firefighters, construction workers, and nurses. People who work hard for a living, who love this country, and who play by the rules. Bongino's voice was heavy with contempt for her elitism. And you labeled them deplorable because they did not bow down to you, because they did not vote for you, and because they saw right through you. Hillary was gathering her belongings, clearly preparing to depart the stage. This whole thing is not about Democrat versus Republican, Bongino stated, his voice changing to become more personal and real. It is about people like you versus people like us. He pointed at her, then pointed at himself. You grew up in privilege, Park Ridge, Illinois, nice suburban childhood, Wellesley College, Yale Law School, Rose Garden wedding, White House, State Department, millions of dollars. Bongino's voice was thick with emotion now as he spoke. I grew up in Queens, in an apartment above a candy store. My dad was a fireman and my mom worked in a Catholic school. I became a cop because that is what kids from my neighborhood did. Then Secret Service. I worked hard for everything I have achieved. He stepped closer toward her. And the distinction between us is essentially this. I spent my career protecting people and serving people. You spent yours utilizing them, exploiting them, and getting wealthy off them while they got poorer. Hillary had her microphone off now and was standing ready to leave. I don't have to listen to this, she said, but her voice was shaking visibly. No, you do not, Bongino agreed with her. You can walk away. Just like you walked away from Ambassador Stevens. Just like you walked away from those 4 men in Benghazi. And just like you walk away from everyone who is not useful to you anymore. Hillary's face contorted with rage at the comparison. This is a lynching, she stated, a high-tech lynching. The studio went deathly silent at the utilization of that word. Even her supporters looked uncomfortable with that comparison. Bongino just stared at her for a moment, and when he spoke, his voice was sad rather than angry. A lynching is what happened to Black Americans who had done nothing wrong but exist in a racist society. What is occurring here is a law enforcement official reading from your public record and asking you to explain yourself. He gestured broadly to his binder full of records. These are facts, numbers, dates, your own words, your own emails, and your own foundation's financial records. FBI case files, congressional testimony, all of it is public, and all of it is verifiable. Bongino's voice hardened again as he addressed her. You are not being lynched, Madam Secretary. You are being held accountable. And you cannot stand it because people like you never are held accountable. Hillary grabbed her purse and started walking toward the exit. Secretary Clinton, would you care to make a final statement? Anderson Cooper tried desperately to maintain some semblance of control over the disaster unfolding in his studio. Hillary turned at the door, her face flushed with anger and humiliation. I came here tonight to discuss important issues facing our country, she stated. Instead, I was subjected to a partisan attack filled with long-debunked conspiracy theories and personal insults. Her voice was shaking as she spoke. The American people are smarter than this. They see through these tactics and they know the truth. Then why are you leaving? Bongino called out from across the studio. If you have answers, give them right now. If you can explain the emails, the foundation, Benghazi, and the Russia hoax, then explain them. Hillary just shook her head and walked out of the studio, the doors swinging shut behind her with a heavy thud. The audience sat in stunned silence, nobody knowing what to do next. Half of them had come to cheer Hillary on, and those people looked shell-shocked, as if they had just watched their hero get destroyed. The other half, the ones who had been skeptical of her from the start, looked vindicated by the exchange. Anderson Cooper, ever the professional, tried to salvage something from the wreckage of the broadcast. We are going to take a quick commercial break, he stated, his voice strained. When we come back, we will continue with Deputy Director Bongino. As soon as they cut to commercial, the studio erupted in absolute chaos. Producers were shouting, camera operators were checking their footage, and social media teams were already posting clips. The control room was in a state of full panic. Bongino sat back down in his chair, took a sip of water, and waited patiently. 3 minutes later, they were back live on air. Cooper, to his credit, maintained his composure despite the circumstances. Deputy Director Bongino, Secretary Clinton has left the building. Would you care to make a closing statement to the audience? Bongino looked directly into the camera, not at Cooper, addressing the millions of people watching at home. "This is not about me versus Hillary Clinton," he commenced, his voice steady and calm now. "This is about whether we possess one system of justice for the powerful and another system for everyone else." He leaned forward slightly toward the camera. "I have arrested people, personally arrested them, for performing less than what she did with those classified emails. I have observed lives destroyed for mishandling a solitary classified document. I have watched good people forfeit everything they possessed because they made a mistake." His voice was heavy with conviction as he spoke. "The American people deserve better than a two-tiered justice system. They deserve leaders who serve them, not themselves. They deserve leaders who tell the truth, even when it is difficult, and leaders who take responsibility instead of making excuses." Bongino paused for a moment to let his words resonate. Secretary Clinton had every opportunity tonight to explain herself to the American people. She had the chance to answer the questions and to address the evidence presented. Instead, she attacked me personally, claimed victimhood, and walked out. He shook his head sadly. "That informs you everything you need to comprehend regarding her. When you cannot argue the facts, you attack the person presenting them. When you cannot defend your record, you claim you are being persecuted. When you cannot win the argument on its merits, you leave." His voice softened slightly as he concluded. "The families of those 4 men who died in Benghazi deserved better than what they received. The sailors and soldiers who went to incarceration for mishandling classified intelligence deserved equal justice. The American people who believed the Russia hoax deserved the truth." Bongino looked directly into the camera lens. "That is what this is really about. Equal justice under the law, not certain individuals being above it. And until we possess that, until powerful people face the exact same consequences as everyone else, we do not truly have justice at all." Anderson Cooper nodded slowly. "Thank you, Deputy Director Bongino." As the show wrapped up, as the cameras stopped rolling, and as the studio emptied out, Bongino sat there for a moment. He thought about the 4 men who had died in Benghazi. He thought about the sailors and soldiers in prison for performing a fraction of what Hillary had done. He thought about all the people who played by the rules while the powerful rewrote them for their own benefit. His phone was already blowing up with messages from former Secret Service colleagues, texts from his wife, and emails from conservative media outlets wanting interviews. He ignored all of it for the moment. He had stated what needed to be articulated. The evidence spoke for itself. The American people could decide what it all signified. As he packed up his binder and headed for the exit, a CNN staffer stopped him. "Sir, that was intense. The clip is already going viral." Bongino just nodded. He did not care about going viral. He cared about truth, accountability, and justice. He walked out into the New York night. The cool air felt like a relief after the intense heat of the studio. His security detail fell in around him. Even deputy FBI directors required protection these days. They headed for the waiting vehicle. Tomorrow, the fallout would commence in earnest. Democrats would attack him relentlessly, and the media would attempt to spin the event. Hillary's defenders would assert he had been unfair, unprofessional, and politically motivated, but the facts would not alter regardless of the spin. The emails were real, the foundation corruption was documented, and the Benghazi lies were on record. The Russia hoax had been exposed for what it was. Bongino had accomplished what he set out to achieve. He had arranged the evidence point by point, document by document, and fact by fact. The rest was now up to the American people, and something told him they were paying attention this time. Finally, the next morning, the story dominated every single news cycle. Conservative outlets were triumphant in their coverage. "Bongino destroys Clinton live on CNN" was the headline on a dozen different sites. The clip had been viewed millions of times already, and related hashtags were trending globally. But it was not just conservative media covering it. Even mainstream outlets could not ignore what had transpired. The evidence Bongino had presented was too detailed, too documented, and too verifiable to dismiss simply as partisan assaults. Political analysts were labeling it a catastrophic collapse for Hillary Clinton. Her carefully planned comeback, whatever it might have been intended to be, was finished before it had even commenced. No serious political operative would touch her now. Democratic Party leadership was in damage control mode. Privately, many were relieved. Hillary had been a weight around the party's neck for years. Her insistence on remaining in the spotlight and positioning herself as the moral authority of the Democratic Party had become a significant liability. Younger Democrats were already distancing themselves from her visibly. "We need to move forward, not backward," one rising star stated in an interview. "The party has to be about the future, not relitigating the past." It was political speak for "Hillary Clinton is toxic and we are finished defending her." Polls demonstrated the impact immediately. Trust in the FBI among conservatives jumped 10 points overnight. This was not because they suddenly loved federal law enforcement, but because Bongino, one of their own, a guy from Queens who had worked his way up, was finally holding the powerful accountable. Among independents, the reaction was more nuanced but still significant. They appreciated observing someone in authority willing to speak plainly about corruption and double standards. Whether they agreed with Bongino's politics or not, they respected his willingness to arrange evidence and let it speak for itself. Even some Democrats, quietly in private conversations, admitted they were relieved to see Hillary finally face consequences. They were fatigued from defending the indefensible. They were tired of the ethical clouds that seemed to follow the Clintons everywhere they went. They were tired of the "but her emails" jokes that had become shorthand for Democratic hypocrisy regarding accountability. Hillary herself disappeared from public view entirely. There were no interviews given and no statements released beyond a brief tweet claiming she had been ambushed on live television. Her defenders attempted to rally on social media, but the effort felt half-hearted and performative. The simple truth was that Bongino had presented evidence they could not refute. FBI documents, her own emails, financial records, and congressional testimony were all submitted. All of it was public, and all of it was verifiable. You could not spin that away easily. You could not claim it was fake news when it originated directly from official government records. Dan Bongino returned to his office at FBI headquarters, declined all interview requests, and went back to work. He possessed a job to perform, and grandstanding on television was not it, but in firehouses in Queens, in police precincts across America, in military bases, in small towns, and in working-class neighborhoods everywhere, people felt something they had not felt in a long time. They felt like someone had finally stood up for them. They felt represented by someone who comprehended their lives, someone who knew what it was like to work hard for a living, to follow the regulations, and to play by a system that seemed rigged against ordinary people while the powerful got away with everything. Bongino had given voice to their frustration, their anger, and their sense that justice was supposed to be blind, not selectively enforced based on your last name, your bank account, or your political connections. He had done it not with empty rhetoric or political promises, but with evidence and facts. He had utilized a patient, methodical presentation of a case that could not be denied. That was exactly what made it powerful, and that was what made it matter. The street fighter from Queens had taken on the former Secretary of State, the former First Lady, and the woman who had been the most powerful Democrat in America for a generation, and he had beaten her with nothing but the truth. In a city and in a country where truth had become increasingly rare, that signified something significant. It signified everything. And in FBI offices and police departments across America, in Secret Service details and military units, men and women who had spent their careers serving their country felt a sense of vindication. They felt that the regulations did matter, that evidence did matter, and that the truth did matter. And sometimes, if you were brave enough to stand up and present it, justice could still win. Not always, and certainly not easily, but sometimes it could win, and sometimes was enough reason to keep fighting. Bongino knew that better than anyone else. He had spent his whole life fighting. As a cop, as an agent, and as someone who believed that right and wrong were not just suggestions, but principles worth defending. The fight was not over. It never really was over. There would be other corrupt officials, other powerful people who thought they were above the law, and other battles for truth and accountability. But for one night, in one CNN studio, the Street Fighter had won.